Welcome to the Stepmom Side with Alicia Crasco, the podcast for stepmoms ready to create the life they want and one they actually have a say in. Here we talk all things stepmom life and just a little bit more. Leave the superficial conversations at the door and get ready for perspective shifts and actionable advice to help you on your way to creating the life you want, one step at a time. Hi, Casey. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm super excited to talk to you. So, obviously, we're going to be talking about alcohol and how it affects all of the things, but my audience may or may not know you. So, can you give us a little bit of information about who are you? What do you got going on?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my name is Casey McGuire Davidson. I'm a life and sobriety coach. I work with busy, high achieving women to help them take a break from alcohol and create lives they love without it. So, most of the women I work with are busy working moms. And I came about this work after I spent 20 years in corporate. I was a director at a Fortune 500 company. I worked in marketing and I was a red wine girl. So I absolutely loved drinking. It was part of my identity. And it wasn't anything that anyone really commented on. It was just sort of one of the things that people knew about me was that I loved wine. But what started out with like a glass or two a night over 20 years after I had kids, after, you go through all the stress of work, it somehow grew to about a bottle of wine a night. And I was a daily drinker unless I was trying to quote unquote be good or cut back or go on a health kick or whatever. So it was pretty normal for me to get home, open a bottle of wine, and then through dinner, dishes, kids, homework, they go to bed, I would finish off the bottle of wine. And I would wake up at 3 a.m. with a ton of anxiety. I would wake up in the morning and hate putting on eyeliner on my watery eyes. I was sort of vaguely hungover most days and kept being like, all right, tonight I'm only going to have two glasses, or I'm not going to drink till Friday, or I'm going to have beer instead of wine because I don't like it as much. And it never really worked for very long. And I knew my drinking was a problem, but it was my favorite thing in the entire world. I desperately didn't want to stop. Um, and I tried to moderate it for years. And finally, after reading more Quit Lit, which is books about women quitting drinking, if you've never heard of it, and listening to sobriety podcasts like the one I have, and being in online sort of secret Facebook groups with other people who were just like me, who were struggling with alcohol. I finally hired a sober coach, signed up for a 100-day challenge. And before I hadn't made it past day 4 in 2 years. And sort of slowly, I built up week 1 and week 2 and 30 days and 60 and felt so much better after 100 days. I decided to extend to 6 months and a year. And now it's 9 years later.
Wow, that is crazy. Like, what a way to go from there. I want to back up 1 second and go back to something you said at the beginning, how it's been like 20 years that you had been drinking. Did you grow up around alcohol? Like, did your parents drink, like in your house?
They did. I have to say, I am the only person in my entire family who, I guess, drank too much or too often or loved it. So my parents were diplomats. I grew up overseas. They had a ton of dinner parties.
Mhm.
So there was always like wine was served with every dinner. But unlike me, they'd have a glass or two.
Mhm.
I didn't start drinking until I was in college. I went to a boarding school because my folks were overseas. So there were like you would have gotten suspended if you drank, and I was a very, very good girl. Um, you know, just people pleaser, straight A's, you name it. But I went to college and I joined the women's rugby team, and I was always sort of very hyper vigilant about like grades and what people thought of me and did everybody like me. And I found that when I drank, all of that shut off. Like my brain shut off. I felt like I could stop worrying about what I said or did. And if you don't know rugby, it is like a crash course, a mastermind in problematic drinking. I mean, keg stands, keg runs, drink till you pass out, throw up and drink again. I mean, so
Mhm.
for someone who loved the way it hit me in my body and my mind, having the opportunity to drink like that, where everybody thought it was normal and celebrated, was sort of a perfect storm. I still got straight A's in college and, graduated and got my first job, and nothing bad ever happened, but it kind of set up the idea that I could drink to the point of not remembering stuff and still do really well in work and school and everything, you name it. And so I did that for 20 years.
Wow. So it even followed you like into corporate. Like you could still
Oh,
drink and
yeah.
drink and drink and like still like talk about high achieving.
Yeah, I know. I was like the first, promoted in my consulting class and all that stuff. But yeah, but even since I was in my 20s, I remember it sort of got better and worse after that. But like in my 20s, I remember drinking before going on a big business trip. And I was throwing up all night, like on my floor, throwing up bile, like super shaky. And I told my mom the next morning, and she was like, Casey, I think you might need to reevaluate your relationship with alcohol. And it became a joke, like a punchline in my family,
Yeah.
poo, poo.
Mhm.
I mean, that was probably 18 years before I stopped drinking.
Wow. Okay. That is wild. Yeah. I can imagine that it becomes like this persona that you've got. Like
Yeah.
I don't have a problem because like look how awesome I am at like all of these other things. Like I'm so good. Like I'm
Mhm.
actually outperforming you, like somebody that doesn't even
Yeah.
drink, or like somebody that like has a glass of wine and is like, oh, or whatever.
Yeah.
Wow. So talk
What's
me.
interesting is so many women. I know, by the way, if you're hearing this and you're like, oh my God, she drank a bottle of wine a night, that is not as uncommon as you think it
No.
is. Like, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of really high achieving, awesome, cool women who are doing it too. Nobody talks about it if they're worried about it, because it's like this third rail. Like, we can talk about like I'm cutting out gluten, or I'm worried about my diet, or I need to do Whole 30, or I need to cut back on sugar. Nobody talks about alcohol because there's such a stigma associated with if you struggle with it, which is kind of funny because it is the most common substance pushed on us for like stress relief and connection. And you go to any restaurant, the first thing they do is bring you the drinks menu. So it's interesting. And what's cool is that it's changing. The sober curious movement is everywhere now. Dry January is everywhere. Gen Z and millennials are drinking so much less than their parents and grandparents did because they know what it does to your body and your mental health. And with social media, if anyone had live video broadcasting in college, I might have rethought some of those things I
Right?
did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I can totally relate to that. Yeah, it is interesting because I see a lot more like non-alcoholic options or sober curious or, I completely agree with you. I think that alcohol is not typically something that people are like, I'm cutting back on, right?
Yeah.
And it is pushed everywhere. It's one of those substances that if you don't drink it, people are like, are you pregnant?
Yeah.
Or like,
Oh
what's
my
wrong with
God.
you? Yeah, right? Like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Like, why don't you drink? Like, I have kids, so I have to drink. And I'm like, oh. And so my experience growing up was quite a bit different. Like, my mom never drank. My parents are divorced, but my mom never drank. I mean,
Uh-huh.
she probably drank once or twice a year, maybe, if we
That's
were.
amazing.
And honestly, like this is funny, but like not funny. But she was very uptight, very like do as I say, like all of those things. So I was like, wow, if when she would drink, I'm like, she's actually like normal or like nice or just like could relax. But it was
Yeah.
all very like it was a lot. But I'm like, I remember thinking like she should drink more often. Like I would actually like her.
What's
Right?
interesting is that you say that. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest fears women have when they stop drinking is if you're used to drinking in any kind of regular context. Now, I'm not talking a bottle of wine a night. I'm talking even like, oh, I drink on Friday and Saturday nights, or I have 2 glasses of wine a night, or drink a couple times a week. Alcohol does some things to your body that, I mean, it is addictive. So think about if you were a smoker, not a ton of people are these days, but if you were to stop smoking, you would go into withdrawal and your body would crave cigarettes. The same thing happens to you with alcohol. It takes almost a week to go through the withdrawal from alcohol. And drinking does a couple things. One, it spikes your cortisol, which is your stress hormone, and it takes 1 to 2 weeks for that to go away. So we think that alcohol relaxes us. It actually makes us more anxious than we would be if we were not drinking.
Mhm.
It also spikes your dopamine really high, which is your happy hormone, which means your body wants to regulate itself and it suppresses your resting level of dopamine and serotonin, which is your mood stabilizer. So it takes almost a month for your body to come back to as happy and as stable you would be with your moods if you weren't drinking at all. And so when women, and I know I did this for me, stopped drinking, I was irritated, I was annoyed, I was antsy, I was pissed I wasn't drinking, even when I was like, I'm doing dry January. The thing is that that goes away. But I hear women say to me all the time, I'm actually a nicer mom when I drink. I'm less snappy with my kids. And that's because they're in the craving withdrawal cycle. If you get past 2 weeks, you will feel so much better. If you get to a month, you will have bursts of joy and happiness that you probably haven't felt in years, but not your first week. So it's interesting that you said that she would be happier if she was drinking. For your mom, if you only drink a couple times a year, yeah, I mean, whatever that is. But a lot of women drink because they're self-medicating for stress or anxiety or overwhelm or ADHD. I mean, if you struggle with ADHD, you are 5 times more likely to struggle with alcohol. So there's a lot going on there.
There's so much going on there. So talk to me about the effect. We'll start like broad picture and then kind of like narrow it down. Talk to me about the effect alcohol has on marriages.
Yeah. Um, it's really interesting. It impacts it a couple different ways. So I had been married for 14 years before I stopped drinking. We found each other in our first consulting job out of college. Started dating when we were 22 or 23. Now we've been married for 22 years. So we were drinking buddies our entire life. And he is much more of a normal drinker than I am. He still drinks. He never stopped. But I was always, he was always the one who drove home. He was
Mhm.
always the one who paid the babysitter. It was like unspoken that if we were both drinking, he needed to be in charge of like getting us home because I had no off switch and I just wanted to have a good time. And um, what was interesting was, we had a great marriage. I had a great job. I had gorgeous kids, went on vacations, you name it. I didn't realize until I stopped drinking how little I told him about what was going on in my own mind and in my own emotions. I didn't want him to know that I thought I drank too much. So I wouldn't talk to him about it at all. I was very defensive. Um, you know, if he'd ever say anything, if I was like opening bottle number two on a Tuesday, he'd be like, "What are you doing?" And I'd be like, "What, babe? I just want one more glass. What's the problem?" It was always like, I had a hard day. I keep everything together. I keep everything on track. This is my one reward. But in the morning, if he'd ask me if I felt okay, I was super defensive. I wouldn't look him in the eye because I didn't want him to call me out. Um, it wasn't until I stopped drinking that our relationship got so much more honest and so much closer. And by the way, I didn't tell him anything other than I was taking a 100-day break. I didn't tell him I'd hired a sober coach. I didn't tell him I was worried about my drinking. I told him it was a health kick. I didn't tell him I joined an online program. But during that process, I met so many other women that were just like me who stopped drinking and felt so much better. I mean, I was happier. I lost like 30 pounds. I was more patient, more calm. And I asked my husband after 30 days, I was like, I was worried he was bored, right? I was worried he was bored without me drinking and being partying and whatever it was.
Because you're
And
not
I
fun
said,
anymore,
yeah,
right?
exactly. And I was like, have you noticed anything? And he's like, yeah, our house is just a lot more peaceful. Like you're just a lot more even. You used to come home and some days you'd be really upset about work, or some days you'd be like super happy and celebrating. And now, like, you're just really consistently peaceful. I thought that would be boring. He saw that as positive calm. I mean, I was 40 years old, like me, quote unquote, falling asleep on the couch and not being able to wake up. Like it wasn't quite as cute as it was when I was 24, you know?
That's, oh my gosh, that's hilarious. When you said that he thought that was great, like there was more peace and calm, I like got chills all over because I can only imagine. Like I know people in that situation and yeah, they're like, right, like I'm not gonna look them in the eye because I don't want to answer the truth. I'm just gonna avoid eye contact or I'm just gonna push through or I'm gonna pretend like everything is fine. And it's interesting because the amount of sugar that there is in wine.
Oh my God.
But
Yes.
we're cutting back on sugar, but I'm still drinking wine. I'm
Oh, but
like,
I'm going to cut out gluten for my gut health. But oh my God, I'm ingesting this. Like alcohol is actually
weird.
ethanol. And when I was drinking, I didn't want to hear anything about it. It is the same thing in gasoline. Um, it is in no way good for your body. Like moderate drinkers are not healthier than non-drinkers. The Surgeon General came out just in January saying that no amount of alcohol is good for you. It is associated with 7 different types of cancer. If you have 3 drinks a week, it boosts your risk of breast cancer by 15%. Any drink on top of that is an additional 10%. I mean, it's drinking a bottle of wine is the cancer risk equivalent of smoking 10 cigarettes, which
Oh, wow.
I did not want to hear that at all. Like I was just, and it wouldn't have stopped me from drinking because I would have been like, we do things every day that aren't good for us. But the idea that we are doing all these things to improve our health and still drinking is interesting, is what I'd say. And I would have been right there. I used to drink a bottle of wine and I get up at 5:30 and do a hit boot camp. And there is nothing worse than doing burpees with a hangover. I gotta tell you.
Right?
But
You're like gonna puke.
I did it 5 days a week because I was like, see, I'm healthy. I'm good. I'm keeping everything above the board, like nothing to see here.
Why do you think that is with high achieving women?
Oh my gosh. Do you know that the biggest binge drinkers, full stop, are midlife women with the um, highest status jobs, the highest socioeconomic status? Um, they drink more than anyone else for a couple of reasons. The Atlantic did a really interesting article saying that drinking has a stress divide between men and women. So women drink to manage stress and overwhelm. It is their outlet and their way of shutting off their mind. Um, it gives them a boost of energy. So alcohol is really interesting. It is both a depressant and a stimulant, right? You mentioned all that sugar spikes your dopamine, gets you that giddy feeling, but it also slows your body down. It slows what happens in your mind. It puts this film around you. And so it does those things. It hits your bloodstream really fast. So it is no surprise that we drink because it works.
Mhm.
On the other hand, it is an addictive substance. It just is. So it is very, very easy to go from I drink 3 times a week to I drink 5 days a week, or from I drink a glass of wine a night to I drink 2 or 3. That is very, very easy to do. And so women, during the pandemic, women's binge drinking went up 40%.
Mhm.
Parents with kids under the age of 5 years old went up 323% during 2020. I mean, it is, I used to love it because it was a couple things for me. One, when I had kids, I went from work to daycare to home. I could no longer go to guitar lessons and Pilates or do a hike with my girlfriends. Like it just, when you have a newborn, when you have a toddler, it doesn't happen. I could drink wine while playing Candyland. I could drink wine while making dinner. I could drink wine while playing Legos. I could multitask,
Mhm.
yet still try to retain, hey, I'm an adult. I do have rewards in my life. This is good. And it also was sold to women like a luxury lifestyle, right? Like, so if you drink this, you're sophisticated. I mean, Cosmo used to do those
100%. Oh
those
my gosh, I remember
quizzes,
them.
right? What can you tell about a woman by what she drinks? If she drinks beer, she's X. If she drinks a Manhattan, she's Y. Like it's so loaded with metaphors. Even when you watch your movies,
Mhm.
what the woman drinks somehow signifies the type of woman she is.
100%. I've never thought about it like that, but yeah, you're right. Even though I've taken the Cosmo quizzes like forever ago, which is like
Oh
so
my God, I
insane.
used to pick what I would drink in my 20s because I was like, I want to be seen as X type of woman, you know?
Yeah. I've never even thought about it like in movies. Yeah, but you're right. So what I'm also hearing though is like you said, you went from work to daycare to home and like life, right? Like you work at a stressful job or worked at a stressful job and
Yeah,
then you went right into getting your kids, which is they're kids, right? They're just gonna be stressful anyway, like picking them
yeah,
up and all of that. And then holy shit, like I have to run home and like get dinner on and did it because the bedtime clock is now counting, right? And
yeah.
it's starting. And so I need to make sure that homework is done and this. And even though it's 2025, a majority of parenting still falls on women.
Oh,
And
100%.
then if you're in corporate and you are in a high status job and you don't even necessarily have to be in corporate, but if you
You're like penalized for being a mom too, right? Because I
100%.
used to work till 7 p.m. Once I had kids, I had to leave at 5:40. Daycare closed at 6.
Hmm.
And so I'm running out of there. So I would get all the things done with the kids, and then I would put my computer on again at 8:30, 9 o'clock at night and start working again. And I would do that with a glass of wine beside me because you know what? I freaking deserved it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and you mentioned we were chatting about our husbands and schedules and stuff like that before we jumped on. So my husband, I was always the primary breadwinner for 20 years. My husband was a sixth grade teacher, now is the head of a middle school, but he also coached varsity basketball and baseball, which meant that he was gone 5 days a week, until 7:30 or 8. When you have little kids, that is pretty much like the entire day. And
Yeah.
he was gone all day Saturdays at games. He had a lot of night games. And it, whether or not you want to, you resent him. You know what I mean? Like, so it also was a little bit of a fuck you to
Hmm.
him
Hmm.
when he was out doing all his stuff and I was doing everything. I do all the doctor's appointments, I do XYZ, I'm the primary breadwinner, and all that resentment makes you want to drink at someone. And what is very interesting is once I stopped drinking, first, a lot of my anger and resentment and stuff went away just because of the way my body and nervous system was functioning. But also, I had to get way better at boundaries because I had to take care of myself in a way that I wasn't coming home and knocking myself unconscious every night,
Hmm.
which means I had to decide to go to therapy once a week on Thursday nights, which means I had to ask the guy, hey, you have to get the kids, get them dinner, do XYZ every Thursday. And he was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm the head coach. And I'm like, you have three assistants. Like, what have I been doing as a director in corporate America for freaking 20 years?
Hmm.
Like, deal with it. I mean, I would manage everything when we had like clients in town, regardless. So it was interesting. And I also started hiring a lot more babysitters. I started going to yoga. I started getting together with other women who were quitting drinking. I would go to this awesome monthly dinner party with other sober women who were in downtown Seattle. And one was an author and one was a stand-up comic. And as
Oh.
opposed to sitting on my couch drinking and like not remembering the end of Scandal, it was so much more interesting, but I got a lot stronger and I asked for more and I was way happier than when I was like drinking because he got to do everything he wanted and I just, fit whatever I wanted in at the end of the day.
Yeah. The biggest takeaway for me there is asking for help.
Yes. Yes. 100%. And like putting yourself first, like figuring out what you need to keep yourself in that emotional green zone
Oh my gosh.
and like taking it because you deserve it. Like women are so used to taking the dregs of whatever is left.
Hmm.
And nobody is like, if you have poor boundaries, even with your spouse, even with your mother, especially with your boss, like that works for them. So you almost have to renegotiate giving everything to other people. And you can do it in a way that is kind and, equal and good. But it is a lot easier to drink than to handle that change and conflict.
Wait, this isn't just about drinking?
No,
Yeah, it's
it's
so, yeah,
it's about everything,
it
right?
is. Oh my gosh, yeah. I remember so my husband and I, same thing, like marriage kind of you have a kid, so I'm a stepmom, right? You know that. But
Hmm.
like when you were talking about like everything that you do just like falling to the wayside, 100,000%. Like I was 26 when I became a stepmom. Like I have a job, like killing it, like all of the
Yeah.
awesome things. And then like I went from single living in Dallas. I'm in Michigan now. Like that's where my husband lived. We had a long distance relationship for a while. And then all of a sudden there were two kids that were 8 and 11. And I was like,
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
holy shit, like all of the schedules and like all of the
The
things going on.
sport practices dying. Like
Yeah,
my
like what
my
are we
son
doing?
can drive now. He's 16 and I'm like, it is a different world. Like
Different.
my entire
Welcome.
life was driving them to three different sports.
Yeah, it's a new level of parenting that's been unlocked for you, like when you can have one that drives, right? But I was just like, what is happening? This is a lot of chaos. Like I literally jumped out of the pan into the fire and I had no idea what was going on. And I drank a lot. I was like, but I didn't grow up around drinking. And when
Yeah.
I at work, like when I had started working, there was people that I worked with and I'd go out and like they'd have two drinks at dinner and I'd be like, I think they're alcoholics. Like I they like what is wrong with them? Like they drink so much, right? Like little did
Yeah.
I know. Like in just a few short years, I'd be like two drinks. Pff, that is nothing. But I was like, wait, and then it came to me that I was like, I don't understand what is happening because I didn't grow up around alcohol. It was never taboo at my house. So I never had like that. I can't wait till I go to college because then I can just like go
Yeah.
buck wild and like just drink to my heart's content and just like all of the things. It was never like that for me. But then it got to the point where I was just like, I don't like this. I don't like that I feel like I need to drink just to be around all of you, any of you,
Yeah.
even me. I was just like, I didn't like who I turned into. It was just, it was a lot. And then I was like, okay, we need to get this together because I don't like this. And
Hmm.
at that point, we weren't going to have any kids, but I was like, I don't like the idea of like my stepkids coming here and something could happen and no one can drive them anywhere. At the time, they
Yes.
could drive, right? And
Yeah.
so I'm like, somebody has to be responsible. And I felt like it was on me to be responsible. Obviously, it wasn't, but like as a woman, I was like, I feel like I should be the responsible one. So when you were talking about that, so then fast forward, we have our daughter. And to be honest with you, Casey, like I really don't drink that much now. Like maybe one night a week at
Yeah.
all. Like maybe. It's not something that I'm like, oh, I can't wait to drink or like, oh, I don't drink. And like I was telling you, I have a
Yeah.
girlfriend that's like, I understand why people drink. Like they've got kids, like just to like get that escape. She's like, I
Yeah.
can't drink, but like I understand why people do. Like just give me something to take
The
me
mommy wine culture is huge. Like it is
huge.
pushed on you. There are even wines that are called like mommy timeout. I
I've
mean,
seen dad ones too, like hard seltzers, like
yeah.
dad's water or something like that. I don't remember. And I was like,
And
what?
all those glasses, like, I wine when you wine. I mean, it's just so gross. But by the way, when I was drinking, I was all about it. Like there were these comedy books called like Nap Time is the New Happy Hour or Sippy Cups Are Not for Chardonnay. They were like funny and, relatable. And by the way, parenting is hard and it is true, but it's insidious the way that alcohol is targeted towards women and especially moms
Hmm.
as a solution to your problems.
Hmm. Yeah. And so I remember driving to a dance lesson with my husband and just him and I in the car and we were talking about like parenting and like just different challenges that like I see that we have or people like, oh, you know what, Casey was telling me that her and her husband are struggling with this or whatever. And he was like, you know what, as women, you guys are sold the biggest lie ever. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he was like, you guys are sold that you can have it all and you can do it all. And
Hmm.
he was like, yeah, you can do it all, but something is falling to the wayside when you
Yeah.
do whatever it is. So if you want to be like a kick-ass like corporate chick, that's awesome. But like your parenting is gonna suffer, your marriage is gonna suffer. Like if you're gonna be, whatever it is, if you're gonna be an awesome mom and like there and present and all of the things, there something else when you're doing that is like gonna take the back burner. He was like, you can't just do everything and not have any help. And me, Miss Type A, like overachiever over here,
Yeah.
was like, what? What? And then I was like, let me just, you know what, let me take my blinders off. Like, let me be open-minded. Like, let me listen to him. And I was like, you know what? You're right. I only have 24 hours in a day.
It's
There,
actually pretty impressive that he recognized that.
yeah.
Um,
I have a good one.
and
I
actually
feel like so
said that.
fortunate.
Yeah, I mean, I have a good one too, but it is a lot. I've heard that like when people have kids, like 80% of women's lives change, regardless whether they stay at home or go to work, and they resent the 20%.
Mm.
For men, 20% of their lives change and they resented 80%. Like it's not equal.
It's not equal at all. And then like add in alcohol, right? So then talk to me about how parenting like affects your alcohol. I mean,
Oh
how
my God.
alcohol affects your parenting. There we go.
Yeah.
I mean, parenting does
Um,
affect your alcohol for a while, but yeah.
it impacts your parenting a lot. Like number one, and by the way, I just want to say I am not anti-alcohol. Like people always like I go to things with my husband at wineries for his like school banquet, and these people are drinking wine, which is awesome. I'm the middle school head's wife, and they're like, "What is it that you do?" And so I'm like, "Oh, I'm a podcaster and a coach." And I don't
Just leave
like
out what I
and then
actually do.
and then they're like, "Oh, what kind of coach?" And so I'm like, "Actually, I'm a sober coach. I help women quit drinking." And it cracks me up because I can see it. First thing they do is look at their wine. Second thing they do is take a step back. Third thing they do is tell me that they don't actually drink so much. And I'm just like, I don't care. Like, I don't care how much you drink. If you want to stop drinking or take a break, I'm thrilled to help you. But like, I'm not here to convert anyone at all who doesn't want help. All I had big drinking friends. I'm still friends with all of them. My husband still drinks. Like, I just know that for me, it was making like 2 hours every night better and 22 hours of my life worse. My sleep was worse. My anxiety was worse. I looked worse. You name it. So in terms of parenting, it's interesting because I have two different views on it. So I drank until my son was 8, and I quit drinking when my daughter was almost 2, not quite 2. So I did the toddler and sort of school age kid thing drinking, and I did it not drinking. I have to tell you that not drinking makes it so much easier, but you have to experience it to know it. So I remember with my son, um, things that I regret. And by the way, nothing terrible. I had no big bottom. Like things like I was supposed to collect the leprechaun coins when he was 5. And I drank and I forgot. My husband was out of town. He came into my room crying that the leprechaun hadn't come. And I went on social and did the hashtag mom fail or whatever you do to cover your shit. And everybody was like, oh my God, you're fine. It's just
Hmm.
so hard. I knew it was because I drank so much. I knew that I forgot because I drank so much. I didn't want anyone else to know that. I was always like safe, but it was really because my husband was around, meaning like I wouldn't drink too much until my kids went to bed, but my husband was there. I would never drive when I was drinking, but it was because I either took an Uber or my husband was there. Um, it was, I'm very, very lucky that I was married to him for 14 years when I was drinking because he's a good one. At the same time, there is nothing worse than waking up with a hangover and dealing with a toddler. Literally nothing worse. There's nothing worse than feeling. I mean, I remember with my daughter when she was, almost 2, being like, can you not jump on the couch? Mommy doesn't feel so good. You know, just knowing that I mean, I used to wake up at 3 a.m. with anxiety, which, by the way, if you are worried about your anxiety or your sleep, take a 30-day break from drinking. You will be shocked at how much better you will feel. I think 60% of my anxiety went away when I stopped drinking. I still struggle with it. So, it's an ongoing thing. But I would wake up at 3 a.m. and not go back to sleep, just like freaked out that I wasn't sleeping, wondering how I was going to handle the day and the meetings and the daycare pickup and everything. I would roll over in the morning. My very first thought that I would have is, get your shit together. What the fuck is wrong with you? Literally, first thought when I woke up in the
Wow.
morning. I would hate looking in my eyes when I put on my eyeliner. I would drive my daughter to daycare. And when I was talking to her, they're in their car seat and you're talking to them through your rear view mirror. I would hate looking at myself. I mean, and my life looked fantastic on the outside. It really did. Nobody knew. Everybody knew I drank a ton, but nobody knew how I felt inside, including my husband, including my best friend. But it's really hard. And then when you stop, your first month is really hard. And you have to figure out, I mentioned therapy, I mentioned taking breaks throughout the day, I mentioned renegotiating the load with my husband. When you stop drinking, you need to take a lot better care of yourself so that you don't get to the point that you're like, I need an immediate hit. But I was so much happier when I did it because suddenly, I mean, I saved like $500 my first month not drinking.
Wow.
You get like those little calculators, right? Where you see you can save a lot of money. And I took that money. So I'm talking 90 days, take a 100-day break. I saved like $1,600. You can buy a lot of babysitters, a gym membership with kids care and a hot tub and massages and pedicures. I mean, I was so much happier because I was finally not drinking my evenings away, not feeling like crap every day. My nervous system wasn't shot to hell, and I was actually taking care of myself for the first time. Like if I was tired, I went to bed. If I was resentful, I needed a boundary. I needed to ask for more help. I needed to take things off my list. If my boss was giving me crazy deadlines, I couldn't just drink and work all night. So I needed to be like, actually, I need you to prioritize this because it's not all getting done. And people actually respected that because I was good anyway. I was such a people pleaser. I so wanted the straight A's that I gave everything. And then drinking was the way I rewarded myself for doing it.
For like holding everything together.
Oh, yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, oh my gosh, I can relate to that too. Like all of the people pleasing things that you've like shared throughout this. I'm like, yeah, because I've definitely had that feeling of like, okay, that one sip just like enters your body and you're like, okay, I can relax. Or
Yeah.
like, Alicia, you need to do this. Like this person's mad at you because of this or that. And especially like as a stepmom, like so you have like basically all of the responsibility of like being a parent, but
Yeah.
like,
Tell me what the
not,
biggest challenges are because I
oh my
know
gosh.
about them, but like a lot of women in my sober coaching group are stepmoms, like this unclear boundaries, the relationships, the ex, the new responsibilities, money stuff. Like, what are the things that like are really hard as a
Okay.
stepmom?
It sounds like I need to come to your podcast or
Oh my
like
God,
come and
you
speak
do.
in like your coaching
Yeah.
program because how much time do you have? Like I know this is slotted for like an hour and 15, but like there's so much to unpack, especially and a lot of the stepmoms that I coach show up with no kids of their own. Like
Hmm.
never been married and never have had kids of their own. And that is really hard, right? Because as a mom, you're repeating the same thing over and over and over and over and over 800 times because they are kids and you have to repeat them whatever it is that you're trying to tell them 800 times, right? Like put your shoes on. We're going outside. It's winter time. Put your shoes on. Put your shoes on. Put your shoes on, right? Like you know that. But I came in with no kids and I was not, like I told you, it was chaos. Like I did not realize how much like repeating there would be, how much noise there would be,
Oh
how
my
much
God, the
like a
noise.
mess there was. Like high achieving, like immaculate house, like all of the things like in its place. Like, and
Parenting
it's
is
like,
humbling. Like you go from being this fully like actualized person who worked and got rewarded to it to sort of like, what have you done for me lately? And you do everything for them. But like they're like, oh, mom, you're so uncool, XYZ, or and you're like, I did this, I did this, I did that. Like it's you love them, but sometimes you don't like them.
mhm. Yeah. So like the hard part there, like the difference, because I have been in both roles,
Yeah.
is as a stepmom, when my stepkids, they don't anymore, but like when they would never say like, you're not my mom, I don't have to listen to you because I would just level with them and be like, listen, I'm not your mom and I'm not your dad. I'm Alicia. And I would never say I'm your stepmom, right? But like, I'm
Yeah.
Alicia, like I'm on your team. I want to help you. If you lie to me, like we're not going to get through it. But like, unless you kill yourself or somebody else, like we can get through anything. It might not be
Yeah.
pretty, but like we can get through anything. But like, let's say I got them like this really awesome gift that I think that they're going to be like super excited about. And they get it and they're like, and they just chuck it. Like, I am personally attacked. Like, they did that
Yeah.
because it's me. I'm their stepmom. That's why they did it. No, they did it because there's 800 other gifts to open and they've already been to 5 other Christmases and they're just
Yeah.
over Christmas. Right.
Yeah.
Like, if my daughter did that, I'd be like, whatever. Like, she's 5, who cares? But like when my stepkids would do things like that, I would be like, it's because I'm the stepmom. It's
Yeah.
because of me. And it wouldn't even, so, and here's something that I see with a lot of stepmoms. They, because 100%, I totally did this too. Whatever their stepkid did to slight them, to wrong them, or whatever the ex was doing to slight them, or whatever stressor, it doesn't, I don't have to point out somebody specifically, but any stressor, any situation, or any instance that something happens where it doesn't go right
Hmm.
is because of them. Not that they're the stepmom, but because of me, the person. And so
Hmm.
in coaching, I'm like, listen, Casey, it's not you, Casey, as the person. It's the role that you're in. So you and I could switch places and I could go and be married to your husband, and all of those things are going to happen to me. And you could
Yeah.
come and be married to my husband, and all of those things are going to happen to you. It's not you as the person. So trying to
Yeah.
get them to separate out like being personally attacked, which, and it's unless you know how to do that, and unless you can like, okay, let me come back and just be like, okay, Alicia told me it's not because of me, it's because of the role that I'm in, it's
Yeah.
because of what I represent. That's like the biggest thing. But just, yeah, if you show up and you've never had kids before and you are on the scene now with like grown kids that have traditions, that have gender roles of like what their parents do, or they've got like their system set up in their house, and now you have to come in and like assimilate in, but like you don't, there are so many things. Oh my gosh, there's so
Yeah.
many things. Like I said, it's really hard. All of the responsibility, but like none of the authority to like make anything
Oh,
happen.
yes.
So it's
Wow.
just like show up and love them and be amazing and be awesome, but don't discipline them and don't ever be frustrated and don't ever speak your mind unless you've got really nice things to say about them. But love
Yeah.
them like your own. And if you
Yeah.
dare like think about like skipping something, if you would have forgotten the leprechaun coins, it's just because you're evil. Like I just know. Yeah, there are so
That,
many things to like unpack. There's a
yeah, I
lot.
guess there's no like hashtag stepmom failed. That's like everybody's like, haha, so funny. Like you don't
No,
do
not
that on
funny.
social.
No, not funny. Which is funny because things that this is hilarious. Now to me it's hilarious, but not when it was happening. There are things that I would say or do as a stepmom that I would be crucified for. But then with my daughter, we're talking about boundaries, right? With
Yeah.
my daughter, literally do the exact same thing and I'm a great mom
Yeah. Yeah.
because those aren't my kids.
It's hard. And then you've got
So
the other
hard.
parent involved,
Hmm.
and yeah, I can only imagine how difficult that is. And as you're talking about that, because I know this was my world in terms of quitting drinking, like it's so amazing that you have this podcast and that there are communities of stepmoms because it's important to know that you're not alone, that you're not the only one struggling with this, that you can talk to people about your emotions in a judgment-free zone and get useful, actionable advice. Like if you were to tell me, who is not a stepmom, what you're dealing with, I would empathize and help and give you reassurance, but I'd have no idea
Hmm.
about it. Like you need people who get it, who've been there, who are going through it with you. And I would think you need that outside of your marriage. Like that's why therapy is so great too,
So
or
great.
coaching. I'm a coach.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, one of the hardest things is to feel like you're alone.
Hmm. Did you ever feel like that in your early journey?
Oh God, yeah. Yeah. I mean, for most people who stop drinking, and there are a ton of stats around this, it takes about 7 to 10 years from the first time you're worried about it until you actually stop. And I hope that timeline gets a lot shorter with the Sober Curious movement. And, I just want you guys to Google Sober Curious or Dry January because it is mainstream, like so mainstream now. I think 30+% of American adults take part in Dry January. They do
How
it as
did that
groups.
start?
What?
How did that
It
start?
started like over 10 years ago in the UK
Oh, wow.
as sort of a challenge or initiative to raise money for cancer awareness. And it morphed over the year. I mean, I was on NPR Life Kit earlier this month talking about Dry January. Last year, I was on Good Morning America. I was in the New York Times talking
Oh.
about Dry January. Like it is everywhere. And that is so helpful because I think it's taken a lot of the stigma out of either taking a break from drinking, where people aren't like, oh my God, why? Do you have a problem? Are you pregnant?
Mhm.
But also just making it easier to like people actually know that alcohol causes anxiety or hurts your sleep or is associated with cancer. It just isn't healthy for you. And so it's a lot more acceptable to say that without people pressuring you to
Hmm.
drink.
Hmm.
Um, and so my hope is that it takes less time to get to the point where you're starting to worry about your drinking, to taking a break. I recommend a 100-day break. I know that sounds crazy. When I started, I could not get more than a week. 100 days was insane to me. But think about a season. Like you know what winter or spring feels like when you're drinking. You know the events, you know the traditions, you know the highs, you know the lows. Like give yourself the opportunity to see what a season feels like when you're not drinking. Like, what new habits would you develop? What new things might you do that you always told yourself you were going to do, but never get around to? What new coping mechanisms might you experience? Like, instead of going to girls' happy hour, go for a walk, go for brunch, go on a hike. I got my bike tuned up and went biking for the first time in years. But you can also read a ton of books or take a lot of naps or, anything at all that pick up guitar, learn piano, like painting, anything you want. You don't realize how much time and energy drinking takes up in your life until you get rid of it.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And when you're talking about seasons and like different events, 100% because I know people that are like, well, I would you so you see, I would stop drinking, but I can't because Casey's birthday's coming up.
Yeah.
Or I can't because insert whatever. And I'm like, hmm.
Or I'm going to this all inclusive, or my mom's coming to visit in Jesus Christ. Or what I would say is that there is never a good time to stop drinking. If you are waiting until you don't have a dinner party or an anniversary or a drinking event coming up, it will never happen. And wouldn't it be interesting to see what that birthday is like or that vacation is like without drinking? Or what going on a date with your husband is like without drinking. Maybe you don't go to the wine bar. Maybe you go to the park and read books and listen to music like you're young. Or maybe you go to a bookstore and wander around. Or maybe you go to a coffee shop with an open mic night. I mean, we get really lazy with alcohol being the easy button for everything. And I think it's just made us a lot less creative and a lot less curious about what we might enjoy because it's so quick to hit your bloodstream and you don't realize how much it's impacting your life and your relationships and your nervous system and your priorities until you get 3 months away from it. And you can look back and be like, oh my God, I can't believe that a bottle of wine was the highlight of my week. Like, wow,
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
deserve so much more than that.
Hmm. So talk to me like when you're early on, give me like what's the worst advice somebody said to you when you were like, did you tell your friends like I'm struggling with not being able so let me just set the scene for you. So you're on your 100-day thing. So you said it took you a couple weeks to even just like start like to get to more than a
Yeah.
week. So you're on your 100 days. Obviously you're struggling, right? Like this is hard. So did you open up to any of your friends about it?
Yes. So, like I said, I
Was
didn't
that
tell
the
my husband
accountability?
or anybody else that I was worried about my drinking at all. I just said I was doing a 100-day no alcohol challenge. It was a health kick. I wanted to sleep better, have less anxiety, have more energy, make my workouts consistent. That was it. I also told my husband, I love to drink. This is going to be hard for me, but it's something I want to do. And if I have wine in the house, it's going to be really hard for me not to drink it. It's like having a birthday cake on your counter with like a piece cut out of it. You know how you go by and you get a little sliver and then you get a little sliver again.
And it's
And the way
gone.
alcohol works, it just lights up your brain. So it is extremely important to get either all the alcohol or your alcohol of choice out of your house for at least 30 days. And I told my coworkers, my morning workout group, my girlfriends, my husband that I was doing this no alcohol challenge, nothing else. I also got support. So, like you with stepmoms talking about issues, realizing you're not alone, getting tips from people who've been there before. Um, you need that community. You need advice. You are not the first person. I mean, stopping drinking is hard for anyone, regardless of whether it's emotional, habitual, a coping mechanism, or physical. And in this boozy world, there are tips and tricks, so you don't need to do it by yourself. The other thing I would say is hunger is the biggest trigger to drink. So get yourself a protein snack. Like set your alarm for 3:30 or 4 p.m. The witching hour is real. You
Mhm.
do not want to be going into dinner with kids or not kids or driving home from work hungry. And then don't diet. Whatever you do. I used to combine a anytime I got rid of drinking because it was my favorite thing, I would be like, also, I'm going to run 5 days a week and I'm going to cut out sugar and I'm going to do XYZ and I'm going to weigh myself every day. I mean, I'm
I'm doing all the
totally,
things.
yeah. And we do that to ourselves. But removing alcohol is a big enough change that you almost don't get clarity on it and you don't get confusion. Like, are you irritated because you're not drinking or because you're freaking starving? You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's just so I promise you, if you are stopping drinking, take a selfie of yourself on day one, take a selfie of yourself on day 7 and 14 and 21. You will notice the difference, even if the scale doesn't move, even if you eat the cookies and the brownies and the whatever, your face will be less puffy, your eyes will be brighter, your skin will look fantastic. You will be less bloated both in your face and your belly. So don't combine it with a diet. It's big enough. And you will crave sugar because alcohol has a lot of sugar in it, and that is okay. All right, was that too much?
No, that's perfect. I think that's great because it's like anything though, right? Because I say this to stepmoms too when I'm coaching them. So if you're listening, like please come back because this is such a good part. Um, Multitasking, right? Like
Yeah,
please come back to me. A lot of times I see stepmoms say, okay, you know what? I'm stressed out about this. Let's do them all. Like we can't do that. We have to
yeah,
start with something small, like build your confidence up, where this is a little bit different, but it's like do one thing at a time. And once you're good at that one thing, like if you're once you get good at like not drinking, then we can go in and work on whatever it is. Maybe we work on your running or we work on your strength training or we work on
yeah,
your diet of whatever it is that you're actually fueling your body with. We should probably start with the fuel that you're putting in your body.
yeah.
But yeah, it's I love that you say that. Like do one thing, like don't do all of the things. When you, I tried to really hard, like not to laugh hysterically when you said, are you irritable because you quit drinking? Or are you irritable because you are starving? Because yeah, I mean, talk about like a relationship with food, right? Like if you're not eating properly, you are an angry bitch. Like you are just the world hates me and I hate it back, right? And
Yeah.
here we are. And like you're just going to be down that whole path. So you tell your friends, were you embarrassed to tell them or they don't know the real reason, so you were not?
What's
Or
interesting is
secretly, were
people
you?
really play off however you present it. They really do. So if you present it as a positive health change that you are making for a period of time, right? Even my husband, if I'd been like, oh my God, I'm never going to drink again, he would have been like, what the actual? He didn't want me to stop drinking. He just wanted me to like,
Get it
you
together.
know, yeah, pull it together. He was like, I kind of thought you would grow out of this. And I was like, yep, nope, didn't, whatever.
Not a phase, mom
Uh,
or honey.
right. But present it as a health challenge because what I've found when I say that is that immediately people would talk about their like Peloton or the 10K they were doing or the 10K they should do or the 10K they did 15 years ago. Like people want to talk about themselves. And they'll be like, oh my God, I could never do that, but I'm doing a juice cleanse and eating nothing but juice for 2 weeks. And I'm like, you could
Mm.
probably stop drinking if you do.
Yeah.
If you can do that, that's amazing. But so present it in a positive light. Don't be like, oh, I'm so bummed I can't drink. Because then people will be like, oh, don't be so hard on yourself. Like everything in moderation. Whereas if you're like, I'm on day 10 of a challenge and I already feel better, people are going to be like, damn, I should do that. Or I could never do that. But it's not like them being like, why are you doing this? So I think
That's
it's
great.
all about how you present it. And there is no question that taking a break from alcohol is really, really, really good for your health.
Hmm.
Mental health, physical health, emotional health. It just is. Alcohol spikes your anxiety and depression, ruins your sleep, is bad for your body, bad for your skin, causes cancer. You name it, it's bad for you.
Hmm. Hmm. So when you tell your friends they're supportive, but then do you ever go back and say like I'm really struggling with not doing this? Or do you only say that to your husband?
Um, I didn't even really present that to my husband. I just said, you know, I love to drink. This is going to be hard for me because I'm going to want to. Please don't buy me wine. I need no wine in the house for XYZ. I mean, it wasn't the first time I'd said this, so I'd said it before, and then a weekend I'd be like, "Oh my God, babe, today was so tough. Pick me up a bottle of wine." He didn't think I was going to do it. The big difference was I had support from people who got it, that
Mhm.
I could talk to, that I could go to and say, "I'm at a work happy hour and I didn't drink." Or I ordered a ginger beer, or I got a non-alcoholic beer, and they would be like, "You deserve a freaking parade. You are a badass. Way to go." Or I could be like, I am so frustrated. My husband didn't start dinner. My 2-year-old's freaking melting down. I want to drink so bad I want to cry. And they'd be like, step away, make your husband be in charge, go take a hot bath, like go to bed early, let him freaking deal with it. Like you need someone to give you permission to
Mhm.
actually take care of yourself and not turn to alcohol. And so once I didn't tell anyone, even when I got to the end of my 100 days, I just said, I feel so good. I'm going to go for 6 months because you are not required to tell anyone freaking anything, including your mother or your husband or your best friend, until you're ready to or until you want to, but you need support.
Yeah, that's so great. When you told your friends and you came out, like, okay, did you ever say to them, I mean, I'm assuming so because you
Well,
have a course
I'm a
and
sober coach and
yeah, right. I'm like, what was the response then?
they were like, good for you, but you kind of eased them into it, right?
Mhm.
Like, I didn't even tell when I got to 100 days, at 100 day 120, we were going on vacation to Italy. I'm a red wine girl with my mother and my sister and my husband and my son. I mean, trigger, 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 right? And I told my husband in 100 days, I said, okay, I feel so good. I'm going to go for 6 months. And by the way, I was happier. I'd lost 30 pounds. Like there was no question this was a good call.
Mhm.
But he was still really surprised. He still wanted me to like moderate. He didn't get it, probably because I had never told him. But he was like, are you serious? You're not going to drink on this vacation in Italy? You're not going to drink on your birthday? And I was like, no, I feel really good. I'm going to keep going. And so it wasn't until 7 months that I told him I had a sober coach. And the only reason I did it was because she lived in Paris and she was coming to Seattle. And I told him I was meeting friends on this day. And then he was like, oh, I've got a game. So, switch it. And I was like,
I
are you
can't.
freaking kidding? I can't switch it. Like, and then I was like, look, I have a sober coach and XYZ and I need to see her. And he was like, what? Okay, this sounds bad. I have a really good relationship with my husband, but apparently I don't tell him stuff that no wonder I got away with drinking for so long. Um, Now I recommend to my clients, like, tell your spouse. You don't have to tell them everything, but tell them this is something that's really important to you. You can tell them you have a coach. You can tell them your coach suggests X, Y, and Z. Or you're doing, I have a sobriety starter kit program with, you know, 280 women in it. It's really cool. They're all super high achieving working moms. Some stay-at-home moms, some empty nesters, but generally everybody is doing the same thing in life. They're drinking because of stress. They're drinking to celebrate. They haven't been able to moderate. They want to feel better. But um, no, I mean, obviously people know now. What's funny is when I decided to do sober coaching, I said to my husband, I went back to coaching school when I was like 3 years alcohol free. And for a long time, I didn't want to be defined by the fact I don't drink. Like when I was drinking, it was like, I live in Seattle. I'm a mom. I'm a director of marketing. I'm a red wine girl. I love to travel. Like it was one of those. And then after I stopped drinking, I was like, I'm a mom. I live in Seattle. I'm a director of marketing. I stopped drinking. I do XYZ. Like it was just a
And
piece of something about me. And then I went back to coaching school and figured out I was going to just do every woman I knew who was 40 years old, had done everything right, and was like, why am I not happy? Which was every woman I knew at work, every woman I knew from high school, you name it. But I figured out that if woman is also struggling with alcohol in some way, that was really easy to solve because you remove alcohol and it solves 60% of your problems. And then you can deal with whatever the other thing is, the reason that you drink, whether it's anxiety, your career, your spouse, your kids, ADHD, you name it. because there is a reason drinking works for you. There's something you don't have to think about when you open that drink. And you have to get real when you remove it. And so I told my husband, I said, okay, how do you feel about the idea that I'm going to be a sober coach, not a life coach? And people at your work, like parents at your school, this is a really fancy school, are going to know your colleagues. And he was like, babe, why would I worry about the fact that you're helping people be healthier? And I was, because I had all these ideas about
Yeah.
what that meant, what that said about me. And he was funny. He was like, you weren't asking me when you were getting drunk at my school. I should. I was like, touche, good point. Like it was kind of funny.
That's so hilarious. Oh my gosh. Listening to you describe the secrecy reminds me so much of when I'm coaching stepmoms. My
Yeah.
husband doesn't even know that I talk to you, or my husband doesn't even know that I'm in the stepmom side community.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, you know what? They just got home. I have to let you go. I'm like, okay, that's fine. But like, so many times, it's a secret thing, right? Like,
Shame. It's, you don't want to
yeah,
look like you're struggling. It's,
exactly.
you don't want them to judge you. I mean, all of the things, right? But you need support. You need help. This is genuinely a hard thing to do. It's just we think that we should be able to do it by ourselves, or if we're struggling with it at all, it means there's something wrong with us. And there's not.
Mhm. And if I just try harder, because I'm so good at all of these other things, that is the holdup that I see with high achieving stepmoms. That's typically who I attract, like very type A, very ambitious, very career driven, just like fucking killing it at work. But then
Yeah.
like I'm struggling at home. I'm
Yeah.
having a really hard time and I don't know why. But I
Yeah.
also can't tell anyone because I'm so amazing over here. Not that they come and say that, but I can tell, right? Like that's what
Oh, I
like
mean, women say it to me. They're like, I do everything else in my life. Why can I not get a handle on this?
mhm.
And it's because it's complicated. And it hits every aspect of who you are. And we don't talk about it, so we don't get support. I mean, every woman I know these days is like, oh, I'm on anti-anxiety meds. I'm going to therapy. I'm doing XYZ. They come to me and they're like, I'm really struggling with alcohol and I've never told anyone about it. And I'm like, that needs to change because I'm all about early intervention, right? Like, you don't have to get to the point where you have quote unquote a problem with alcohol to see if your life is better without it, if you feel better. And even if people do a dry January, even if they do a month alcohol free, you will gather enough information that you realize that everything you thought about alcohol is not necessarily true, that you can connect with your spouse, that you can go to a sports game and not drink, that you can handle a stressful day at work and not drink, that you can have fun without it, or you sleep better. And so the studies have shown that for those people who do dry January, even if they go back to drinking, they drink less.
Mhm. Because your body is just like, I actually liked
And
it without it.
you've given yourself a chance and you're forming new habits and you're gaining new experiences. And the next time you wake up with a hangover or the next time you're super anxious or like said something at a work thing that you wish you hadn't, you'll be like, fuck, that was the alcohol. You know what I mean? And then maybe
Mhm.
next time you like order a non-alcoholic beer or you just have one. I mean, for me, I had no off switch. If I had a drink, my brain lit up and I just wanted to keep drinking. Um, but again, I didn't have, nobody told me to stop drinking ever. Nobody told me they thought I had a problem with alcohol. Um, so you don't have to have it impacting your life in a negative way for your life not to be better without it. And you deserve to see.
Right? Yeah. I think that based on how much I know of you, it had somebody told you that you had a problem and you should stop drinking, you would have been like, whatever.
I would have been so
Pissed.
defensive. I would be like, you're wrong. I would have been like, I
I'm
resist
fine.
this.
But
Yeah,
it would have
you,
like planted that seed, right? And it would have,
yeah.
yeah.
But I have to say, anyone who drinks um, a lot, they know. They're worried about it. They're waking up at 3 a.m. Like people are like, oh my God, my friends do this and they're not worried about it. And I'm like,
Yeah, they
they
know.
know. I mean, you don't feel good and you're embarrassed and you don't. I mean, my husband would always be like, we talked about this. And I'd be oh, I'm so busy. Of course, I'd try to pretend I remembered. I mean, it's exhausting.
Mm-hmm. Was your husband ever, did he ever say anything to you like when you would fall off the wagon, so to speak, like early on? We've had this conversation so many times, Casey.
No. Although other women I work with say yes. Um, I think I actually had a two-part conversation with my husband on my podcast. So it was really
Whoa.
interesting. I was very nervous to have the conversation. He asked me about it like 5 times before I actually did it because I didn't want to hear anything. We talked about marriage before and after drinking and parenting before and after drinking. And again, he still drinks. We were drinking buddies. We went on every anniversary weekend to wine tasting regions because I loved it. But it was first, he was way kinder to me than I thought he would be because I had all these internal, the little things. He didn't know about the leprechaun. He didn't know about other stuff. Like, he didn't know I woke up at 3 a.m. He didn't know I woke up being like, what the fuck's wrong with me?
Mhm.
And he was much kinder to me than I thought he would be. He was actually really proud of me for stopping drinking. Um, when I hit 100 days, he got me a card and a journal and told me he was so proud of me. When I hit 1,000 days, he and my 10-year-old son went to, Target or Ben Franklin or wherever. They got me this entire huge glass vase and put in 1,000 glass marbles and gave me a card and were just like, you are amazing. You are so, and I was not a
That
sober
is
coach.
so sweet.
Yeah, it,
Oh my
it,
gosh.
it, and
That's so
so, but, from going from desperately wanting him to not know about this thing, to him being totally proud of me, even though, he didn't necessarily want me to stop drinking. I think at one point he was like, so you don't think you could moderate? And I think the only thing I said to him was like, babe, our family wanted no part of where that train was headed. It wasn't good. And he was like, all right, you know?
fair enough. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
This has been so good. Where can people find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my podcast is the Hello Someday podcast for sober, curious women. That's a great place to find me. You can go to hellosomedaycoaching.com and I've got a free 30-day guide to your first month alcohol free. And I have a sober coaching program that's online, but with a community. I do group coaching and it is designed just for busy women. So your struggles, your triggers, your anything that women deal with. And that's at the sobrietystarterkit.com.
And I will link everything in the show notes so everyone can find it super, super easy. You can just click and make it easy. But thank you so much, Casey. This has been awesome. I'm like, I could talk to you all day, I think.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this week's episode. If anything was helpful or resonated with you, please share it on social media and tag me. I'm just at Alicia Crosco. And if you could leave a 5-star rating and a review while you're at it, that would also be really helpful. And if you find yourself struggling with your stepmom journey and you want a little bit more support without the hefty price tag of coaching, you might want to check out the Stepmom Side community, which is my own private community for stepmoms, where you get to connect with other stepmoms around the world and myself, where I hold weekly office hours and monthly group coaching. It's kind of like you have your own personal coach in your own back pocket. Again, without that hefty price tag. See you next week.